Cafe anyway.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
Welcome to FF episode 2439, 2439. Did you notice the last podcast was called Ergo? Yeah.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
That's not pretentious at all, but hey, I did that on the last show, and I have to say, I sat in front of a microphone and recorded the podcast, then brought it to you, and now here I am again. It's a daily podcast. I did it the next day, so you get to hear my voice again. And I hope it's sounding okay. I got the processor on.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
A little bit of the mic processor. I know I might be a little bit on the overgain, on the over tap, but
Mike's
I think my
Daily
voice will
Podcast
be okay to listen to for this podcast today, this little podcast, because I didn't mean to pull the curtain back and show you all these things, all this stuff going on behind the scenes, but no, I just got this little, what is it called, a Valley Audio microphone processor, and it is however, I do not have a boom, so I just have a mic stand. Thus the sound of bowling. That was a bowling. Kind of sounds like that, or what happens when you're inebriated and you're walking up a very steep hill, but your head is dragging on the ground. I don't know. Something like that. At any rate, Mike's Daily Podcast today. Here at Cafe Anyway. The last place on earth, somewhere in Podcastro Valley. It's good to be here. I have to get up really early tomorrow because somebody is off tomorrow. They gotta go see a doctor or something, and I don't know, it's the last week that they're employed at my workplace, and they're taking a day off. I have a feeling it might be they want to burn one of their vacation days before they take off, but who am I to judge, really?
And here's today's podcast picture.
At any rate, and I'm gonna whine and moan about it, I gotta get up before 5 a.m. tomorrow so I can head over to Fremont, California, and thusly, ergo, do the show. There's a wonderful show. You should tune in if you're listening to this before Tuesday morning. Actually, if you wake up at 6 a.m., there's a show called New Focus on Wealth. Then at 7 a.m., the Rob Black and Your Money show. Rob Black hosts both of the shows, and I'll be producing for him. Oh, the late, great Basil the Boxer. I will say, an interesting thing about Rob Black, the late, great Basil the Boxer. I produced his show for about 3 years, and he and I would talk about dogs. He has a Vizsla. And I had the late, great Basil the Boxer, but he also had a great dog called Maisie the Wonder Dog, who passed away while I was doing his show, in the time span, during that era. And I remember it was very hard on him. Well, the day that Basil passed away, that morning, I found out about it while I was producing Rob's show, and I was just shocked. I got the news from my lovely lady friend that Basil was no longer with us, and I was just like, wait, the what? And Rob, immediately, we were coming back from commercial, and he did a whole thing, even though his show's about money and finances and planning for retirement, he spent a good deal of time talking about how important pets are in our lives, and how Winston Churchill once had a quote, he trusted dogs, he'd much rather have dogs as friends than humans. And it was just wonderful. I even saved it. It was such a nice thing to hear. And it was such a horrible day. The reason why I had to get up early and I couldn't be there, because Basil basically passed away while I was doing Rob's show. One of the reasons why was because there was a guy that used to work for me that would just take off random days, just out of the blue, call me the night before. Oh, I can't make it tomorrow morning. And he was a millennial and a gamer, and just very untrustworthy, and just, I can't stand it. So I had to end up doing there's some things at my job that are wrought with issues. Why an operations manager has to come in and do an early morning shift when somebody should be working and doing that, I don't know. But that's my issue, and I gotta deal with that. And someday I'll be able to fix it. But some days I have really good work. I get good employees in there who can actually be there and substitute for each other when one person has to leave. And at any rate, that's all. That was my little moaning session. The section of the show session. My little moaning session. All right. At any rate, my point being that I used the term ergo in the last show. And oh, my lovely lady friend is making some kind of noise here at Cafe Anyway. And I was going to talk about dealing with ego. Ego in the workplace. Some people at work, oh my gosh, they're too good to... But before I do that, here's what you should do. You should set a goal for the week. Unplug from your phone an hour before bed. Drink an extra cup of water. Read or listen to something educational, like this show. Connect with a colleague or a friend. Do that this week. A friend you haven't talked to in a while. On Saturday, you should have a digital detox day where you shut it all down. All down. Everything that has to do with the internet, just shut it down and go a whole day without it. And then on Sunday, you should try a new hobby, like planting things. Planting, you know, maybe you should find a book to read. That's right. Okay. Here we go. Dealing with egos as we go outside a cafe anyway, where we bring you Mike's Daily Podcast somewhere in Podcastro Valley, the last place on earth. Some suggestions that, where to go? All right. If you are a human being, chances are you are guilty of having a big ego at times in your life. For some people, it is this defense system that comes and goes with the wind and doesn't cause much harm. For others, it completely takes over their identity and becomes who and what they are. How do you deal with people like that? A big ego is actually a symptom of spiritual disharmony. They lack self-love and self-worth. So by building themselves externally, they are supplementing their deep sense of lacking. They are trying to create superficial personal value. And by boasting this to the world in the form of a big ego, they are really just masking unhealed wounds. So what you should try to do is see through their pain. When you recognize this about someone, you stop taking their front so seriously, see through their pain, and treat them with kindness and compassion nonetheless. Don't feed their ego or juice them up, but create a space for them to actually feel like they matter. Not in a superficial way, but in a genuine way. You should try to love yourself enough to stay centered. If someone with a big ego gets under your skin, whose fault is that? Do you think Justin Bieber could have gotten under the skin of Buddha? Or do you think your coworker would have knocked Jesus away from his center? Part of dealing with toxic people is to take responsibility for your own field of energy whenever you can. Use it as a test for growth. What thoughts are playing over and over in your head that might be contributing to the emotions you're experiencing? Are you anticipating they'll bother you and therefore manifesting it in some way? Are you responding from your emotions? Are you treating this as an opportunity to learn something or as an opportunity for you to feel validated in your position? That all from LinkedIn.com. There you go. I guess it's a way to look at yourself Check yourself before you wreck yourself. We're outside a cafe anyway, somewhere in Podcaster Valley, the last place on earth. Look who's here. Hi, Mike. It's Benita the Rodeo Queen. How you doing?
As a disgruntled fiddle player, tell you what.
What?
I don't have a big ego. You just aren't as good as me.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. Did you get out to the rodeo in Podcaster Valley this week, in the Rowell Ranch Rodeo in the Dublin Grade area?
No.
Oh, okay. Look who else is here.
Oh, Mike, I make the delicious root beer. Have some right now.
You know, thank you. I'm going to have some of this root beer. Oh, good. Very good indeed.
Drink it right now. I'll cut you.
That's not nice. Do you have a big ego?
Yeah, okay. That sounds great. All right, I'm bored.
Good, okay. But in reality, I just want to say that the podcast picture is from yesterday, somewhere in Podcaster Valley 10, Pleasant 10. You can see it at mikesdailypodcast.com. All right, I'm going to wrap up the show. I was really thinking seriously about wrapping it up with some really poignant piece of, I don't know, a good little bit of advice. Like, find a good hobby that helps you realize how cool you are, that you realize that you can learn things. It's good to, when you learn something, you're like, oh my gosh, this just went into my head. My goodness, oh my goodness, you say when you learn something. I don't know, I think it's pretty cool. Like, oh, I did not know Russia's army was so bad. That's what I got because I listened to an educational podcast today. Actually, it's a podcast that then became a radio show. Usually it goes the other way around. But the Daily from the New York Times, that started as a podcast, and I used to listen to it as I drove into work to do Rob's show, which he also has a podcast, by the way. But he, as I was driving into his show thing, I would listen to the Daily by the New York Times. And they would talk about stuff. Sometimes it'd be a little bit too politically, I don't know. But today they were discussing how Putin's army is just so bad. And not to underestimate it, though, but that they really underestimated how bad they were. And they ran into all kinds of problems. There was a river they were trying to cross, and the Ukrainian soldiers literally blew them out of the water. So Russia really, their army is not as good as I think some people on the right actually thought here in America. Russia's going to go right into Ukraine and take over. But they do have a lot of problems. And the one thing, though, not to underestimate them, is that Putin still has a couple cards up his sleeve that you can guess what some of them are. One of them is, I did not know this, that he has not actually formally declared war yet, which if he does that, he could actually institute the draft in Russia and get more soldiers. Something I learned. See, learning things, it's fun. So next show, it'll be the wonderful Madame Rootabega, Valentino, and Bison Bentley. Tell your friends. You can call me and tell me what you think about anything or want to add to anything. 336MM Daily. 3 + 3 = 6. MM as in Mike Matthews. Daily as in what this podcast
Call
is.
now. 336MM Daily.
And you can also email me, mikesdailypodcast@gmail.com.
Mike's Daily Podcast is written and produced and performed by Mike Matthews. His podcast is super easy to find. Download or listen to his show and read his blog at mikesdailypodcast.com. Email Mike now at mikesdailypodcast@gmail.com. See you tomorrow. Bye!